if you want to make a change with your life, I think that you can. I think that you should. And irregardless, even if you remain the same, the world has to change. The world is a constant. The world is always, and there are very few absolutes. But if you think about where you are now, and think about where you might have been, and think about where you could go, nothing is the same, right? Everything around us is is massively different. Evolution in its simplistic form, without getting too scientific and deep. The world has no choice but to evolve. So, in that way, if you can come to consciousness about that, we can agree that the world has a pace. And as the world is moving in its pace towards change, it is moving most likely in very small increments. And occasionally, because everything can't be big, small does turn into big, and change disrupts us. And change, when it's revealed, impacts us immensely and can put us in a predicament where we feel like we might have missed something. Or we may feel like we lost our shot. We may feel like we won't get that chance again. However, I'm here to tell you with absolute certainty and conviction and love and the authority as just a straight up person like you with the same power, ability, and authority of creator that the next change, the world goes through could be all about you. And however you want to change with it, if we but so take some of these things into consideration. I wrote this down. In our hectic, manic, and intense world of change, worrying is a great distraction. I would argue the greatest distraction available to us in life is the thought and the manifestation of worry. Therefore, I ask the question very directly, very simply: what are we actually worried about? What are we worried about? All things being net, what are we worried about? What is occurring in this moment right now that you should absolutely stop, drop, and do everything to address? Because it is that unfortunate that you have to worry about it incessantly. And you have to, I would argue, if there's something to worry about, you're not listening to me. If there's something to worry about, you certainly aren't procrastinating. If there's something to worry about, you're certainly not doing nothing about it. If there's something to worry about, then go do what you need to do to make it stop. What are we talking about here? What are we worried about? I could argue, of course, because of the expansion of the world and what appears to be a frenetic pace, that there's a lot to worry about because we might find ourselves in a state of lack. Listen, let's be human and agree that abundance, there isn't one of us who doesn't want abundance. Spell it how you want to spell it, create it how you want to create it, detail it however detailed you want to make it detailed. If we wake up, look around, and know that all this is possible and we don't have it, that can create worry. Fine, whatever. In that same way, the life we've created for ourselves could cause worry because, well, there's a lot we might have going on that we don't want to lose. So we could be worrying because we don't want to lose what we got. We could be worrying because we want more than what we have. We could be worrying because we don't have. Somewhere across those spectrums. Broadly speaking, with respect to the with respect to all that goes into that, the detail. Okay, fine. Worrying is a great distraction. What are we actually worried about? I wrote this down. Small Small and what appears to be small can become big, right? We've experienced this. We understand the emotional and physical, spiritual, and the real tangible product of small things becoming big. We ignore too much of the small or what appears to be small, and all of a sudden, when it it reaches a oh, what's the word? It sort of reaches an apex, or at least it appears to be, and it really hits us. Boom! It all of a sudden feels big, but it took a lot of small to get to that big. And if we just think about the reality of who we are, our physical health, the physical body is deteriorating by the second. We were all sentenced to death at birth. Do you not realize that? Have we not come to that realization? The minute you were born, boom, you had a timeline. It expires. And so in that way, the body, it can't sustain. It has limits. So just the fact that you're alive, tick tock, tick tock, tick tock, brings you closer to the inevitable. So the body naturally deteriorates. Now, however, and in the same way, if we don't take care of our bodies, we might wake up one day and feel something we don't want to feel, experience something we don't want to experience, get a phone call we don't really want to get from a doctor or somebody that says, and some of it's out of our control, but if you think about it and you really reflect, and we can be what we need to be to see these things. We can appreciate to ourselves. I'm not telling you to go tell everybody or have this realization in a big circle and announce this to everyone. Just to yourself, have this conversation. All these small things, they appear big, boom, because inevitably small after small after small after small after small creates big. Is that not logical? I think so. However, and in the same way, what appears to be big and what comes at you big and massive eventually becomes small. If for no other reason, right? If for no other reason, big will become small because something bigger is waiting. And we all get very uncomfortable in our lives today, especially in the professional space, that we're all expendable. They'll replace you. They'll just, yeah, because, and it's big, it hurts, it's terrible. But as that thing is big and huge and monstrous to you and just you, there's so many other things happening. And as that big change comes to the world and says, look, do it this way, look at the pandemic, big, boom, it became real small, real fast. Now there's remnants, there's things that occur that maybe we can't shake. It impacts us forever. Fine, I'm not saying that it isn't right, wrong, and indifferent. However, big can't remain big if for no other reason there's something else bigger got to come along. Why? Because as we sit possibly in the smallness, the world is creating massive bigness as it is moving in its own pace. The world takes small incremental steps forward regardless. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. I wrote it down a little more eloquently, at least I think I did. But ultimately, you have a pace and everyone has a pace because the world has a pace. And just because you're doing something or not doesn't mean that the world should take notice in a big or a small way. The world just goes. And maybe one day it'll be big for you. Maybe one day it'll be bigger. Maybe one day you'll be the biggest. But even in that same way, as you become the biggest, eventually there's somebody bigger waiting. It's a guarantee. Worrying is a great distraction. What are we actually worrying about? The world around us changes constantly without regard or worry. It is ruthlessly and dynamically fixed in that way. Think about that logic and sort of what is that word? It eludes me. But that something can be dynamic and yet fixed in the same way. The world is fixed in that it must keep moving forward. It must continue to produce change. It must continue to evolve. It's fixed in that way. However, it is dynamic in that we can all make an impact to the change that happens, small or big, big or small, at any time. And while the world is fixed in a direction, which is really just forward, right? The world is just like, we're going, we're going, we're going, we're going. If you're stalling, if you're idle, if you're just not doing anything, the world is not going to look at you it's not going to judge you really. It's just going to move. And then when the change occurs, you are where you are. The world just goes. If you stop, I think that's what I was going to say. You can also make the choice at any point, even after being still, stagnant, and in stasis. If you move and decide to take a small step, the world will accept that. As the world is changing, because the world is the world, and there's many people, like, we can't be ignorant and naive to this fact too. You could have the greatest potential, but there's other people with other great potential in the world, and they may have started before you. They may have started with you. They may start after you.
Yo, why you looking at
They
me?
wind
You
up
know it's
moving
on
ahead
you, baby.
faster. Like they were catapulted forward and shot out of a slingshot. You might be moving like a snail. Either way, there's a pace. And the pace is happening. The world is happening everywhere. And at the same time, whether you're asleep, awake, or somewhere in the middle. That's just the reality. I wrote this down too. All that being taken into consideration. The world, too, moves at a pace. And if you pay strict attention and we stop worrying, we will realize the world is not moving as fast or isn't as big in change as it appears to us. We, of course, don't see it, the change, until it changes, making it feel big and fast and large. And if you haven't slowed yourself down enough to realize this, if you haven't begun to move and be small, because small and small and small eventually has no choice but to become big, but to become big, even if it's just big to you. When you stand still and change is revealed, you feel like, oh my God, what just happened? We're going to get into that. No change in this world is instant. It's just that the world is in a pace of small, compound movements that appear big when it's done stacking those small movements. The world is just going. It is going. It is going whether you worry or not. It is going in an unemotional way. It doesn't have a favorite. It doesn't care where you've come from. It doesn't care what you started with. It doesn't care the cards you were dealt. It has absolutely zero, none, no emotional tie to you. You might want to believe it does. You might want to argue that it should. It won't. Can we not open our eyes and realize that? Now, this is of great significance. I believe I wrote this down too. Because the world has to move and change and reveal bigness, once the world has completed a big move and we get stuck in the moment of that bigness and we don't realize it's fleeting like everything else is fleeting, the world continues moving small towards the next big, because everything big eventually becomes small. I would even argue that if you witness a change today, something that appears to be monumental today, something that is this is going to be the next everything, you've already missed it. Move on, try to find the next change. When you see the change, we jump on it. It becomes viral in many different ways. And we want to cling to it because we want to associate with it, but we missed it. And we missed that in our emotional reaction to it. Because at that moment, we get excited about, oh, look, we could change. Oh, look, it could be us. It's gone. It already occurred. The smallness was happening under the covers, behind the scenes, when you weren't looking, while you were standing still. Why is this important? I don't know. Maybe it's not important. Maybe none of this makes sense. Let's talk it out. If the world, I believe, if you can see it, is moving small towards the next big one, knowing the world must change, I'll make it about me for a minute. Not suggesting that you should do this or that it makes sense to you, that it's logical. I realize I can pace myself in equally small increments. This is why we go to focus on improving every day. Because I've missed enough changes. I've missed enough changes I could have capitalized on, inclusive of myself. Down to the fundamentals of the foundation in which I live my life, the principles, the virtuousness, the ethics, the code. Man, I think there's a wire messing up. Keeps making my screen go black. I'm going to keep flowing. I can move in small increments, knowing I am and must change, even if slower than the pace of the world. I got to be confident, secure, and comfortable in that way. The world's always going to go faster. I'm always going to be slower. I am but a very small part of the whole, of the collective. And also in that same way, the change that I seek may not be as big. I gotta be reasonable. And it could also be massive, but it's just me. And there's so many other that could be so much bigger. And as soon as I get the biggest, more big is coming. So I can change and know I must change and improve every day, even if slower than the world, even if longer in time than the world paces itself. However, the change in me, the change in you, the change in us, once completed, the impact and the realization of it will be as sudden. The way you wake up today and see, wow, look at this thing that just happened in this world. It's crazy. I never would have expected it. Is the same way all of a sudden, boom, your entire life has changed. Just like that. Because as you're making your small little steps, I believe, I talk about this regularly, you release the God in you, the spirit in you, the manifestation, the energy, the vibration, the frequency. The world is looking to match you. Because the world has no prejudice. It says, oh, you're trying to change? I see you. I see you. And it positions other changes to meet you somewhere. Everything meets in the middle some way, somehow. You're always in the center. You're always the center of your world. We're all self-centered. And if we can take our self-centeredness and look to position it in the proper center, eventually everything else we need will meet us right in the center. It's always in the middle. It's always all around us. It will always find us, so long as we're taking those small steps. And I believe again, boom, right? I'm going to reemphasize this point and why we might worry and the difficulties caused by the reality of thought and consciousness. It just is. The ups, the downs, the sideways, the unexpected. It's just the tragedies. I don't want to be unsympathetic. There's something that might hit me that could make me stop forever. God forbid. But that's why I try to prepare myself. That's why I believe in what we're doing. The momentum towards movement and change and constant pressure towards reaching our center, that we can deal with everything that life is going to hit us with. As unfortunate and I get that I've been through difficulties, certainly not the most extreme, although I've seen some things, man, and I've experienced some things that hurt. There's a lot worse that could happen. Cliche, I know, but I don't want to be ill prepared. I don't want to, it's not that I just don't want to miss the change and be part of the change. It's that if God and universe decide I'm not to be part of that change, I don't want to break down. And I could. There's a lot of things that I worry and struggle about that I take to bed with me at night. That the same reasons you find your why and your inspiration and motivation, it's because you're scared to death about if none of that happens or if none of that is there. It is bigger than me. I'm terrified. I'm terrified of that. Right? I'm terrified that I may not get another day. That's terrible. We all think that. I think we all think that. Possibly, maybe. Reinforcing, because we see a changed world, as the changed world reveals itself, not as it is changing, not as it is happening, rather when it's happened. Because we've seen happened changed, we get the sense we've been left behind, right? The world has just changed. I got left behind. I missed my opportunity. I'm worrying. I'm worrying about the same things, repeating the same rhythms, habits, and patterns, expecting something different. I don't know why. That is madness personified. That is crazy. That is borderline psychotic to me. What are we doing when we do that? And it's crazy because the small that we need to contribute in order to see the big is monotonous. It's awfully complex in that it is so simplistic. If you could just find a way to repeat rhythms and patterns and habits that are conducive to constant growth, it means you are constantly moving forward. It means it hurts. It means it's stressful. It means you worry more. Because in the same way you worry about what you don't have and you do nothing about it, is in the same way you worry about that you're doing something about it and you still won't have it. It's difficult. And I wrote this too. It's happened, but it's not finite. It doesn't end. It's always happening. It continues to happen. It's not that it's changed, it's that the world is always changing. Small is always happening until it's too big to be missed. So don't get left behind. What role are you playing in this world and with your life? I think those are all real questions. And they're difficult questions to not just answer, but to ponder. You might get caught and thrown and thrust into a situation where you're given a mic, you're on the stage, and you have to answer for your life. That's a different set of circumstances. And we all believe when left to question and answer for our lives, we're going to answer with the right answer. But then it begs the question for me, what exactly is the right answer? You're going to give the answer for the moment, the answer that you think someone wants to hear. You're going to give the world the answer and the response you believe it is seeking from you because of what the moment, as it's happening and as it's changing, is dictating to you that you should answer and respond with. Why? Because worry leaves us behind. And when we're worrying from behind, generally speaking, logically and reasonable, we give answers that are already ahead of us. Meaning we see the change, so we cling to the change, like I said before. We go viral with the change and we want to associate with the change. You're not that change. That change is already completed. It might be a reflection and a symbol of what you could be, of what you did think, of what you could possibly make manifest. But answering in that way, putting on a mask and a facade in that way to align with what the world is now telling you, put you in the same position where you're not missing the next change. I'm not telling you we shouldn't subscribe to it. I'm not telling you we shouldn't adopt it. I'm not telling you it's not meaningful. What I'm suggesting is answer the question of what are you worrying about? Answer the question about where the world is and how that pertains to you really. And if you find yourself behind pace, know that the pace hasn't stopped or completed and never will cease changing, which at the minimum, if you can accept that, means you still have a chance. There still is an opportunity, even if you missed the last one. The guarantee is always that it is happening, even when you see that it's happened. Change your mind, change your life. I am who I say I am. Do you and stay rich.